And it's a story that's written by a man named Fred Wickman, a friend of mine who collects stories and tales of Kauai. Several books with these stories. This one is called Mama Kualono, which won't mean anything to you, except that's a person's name. So here we go. Once upon a time, long time ago, way before Captain Cook. That kind of tells you this is a long time ago. Right? There was a family living in Kahiki. Now, Kahiki, when you hear this word, it could be Tahiti, but it could also be any place over the horizon. So we're not sure, but what the heck. Think of it as Tahiti. And so in his family, there was a chief named Neolo Pua, and he had his wife, his name was Hina. Hina is a name that you find all over the Pacific. It's one of the most ancient feminine names, usually in terms of a goddess, but sometimes just as part of the story that represents the feminine principle whenever it comes up. But anyway, that was his wife. He had a sister, Mamao. I'll give the short form of his name. And he had two younger brothers, Ulihi and Kolea. So they were all there, very, very good at what they did, which was having an abundance of agriculture, very skillful in managing their island and their resources. And one day, they got a visit from the god Huna, who came in the form of a cloud. And Lono had been over Kauai, and he saw that the people there, at this time, a very long time ago, these were the Moo people. Now today they would be called Menahune, but the original name of these people was Moo. And so, but they were having problems because they were just struggling to survive. They didn't have a lot of skills with the land. They were trying to get along, but really had a lack of knowledge of how to grow crops and how to do them and how to irrigate and all these things. They just didn't have this knowledge. So Lono came to this family in Kahiki and asked them to all go to Kauai and teach the people of Kauai how to farm, how to fish, how to do all the things that were necessary for good living. Of course, when the god asks you to do something, you don't think twice about, well, do I want to do this or not? No, it's kind of like a given. So there they did, the whole family, they all got together, and off they went. They got in their big sailing canoe, Hawaiian style sailing canoe, which typically has an outrigger, and it can have two hulls, the big ones. You all know what an outrigger is, no? Okay. Well, sometimes they have two hulls if it's a big family gathering like this one was. And the Hawaiians had a very different kind of sail that was not found anywhere else in the world. And it was very odd. It came up like that and caught the wind in a different way. It was very good for ocean travel. So off they set, and the god Lono was being kind to them, so he gave them also two of his gods to help them. There was Keaumiki, who was the god of low tide, and Keauka, who was the god of high tide. And he sent them along as guardians and help them reach, guardians and guides to help them reach the island. All right, so off they go. They're on the ocean for a long time. And they brought with them all kinds of things that would help them with the people of Kauai. And so they were very busy during the voyage, most of them. Neololo, who was the chief, was very busy with the navigating, with the sailing itself, and with the fishing. His sister, Mama, was very busy caring for the plants and catching rainwater and making sure all the stores and goods were safe and secure. Now the two brothers, they had some kind of magic. So Ulili had the ability to change into a bird form, a bird called the wandering tattler. And Kolea, he had the ability to turn into a golden plover, if you can see these islands. And they kept busy because they had to go off and they flew ahead of the boat to see and scan the ocean and check for what was happening in the storms and find the way to the island. But Hina had nothing to do. Oh, of course, I forgot. The gods that Huna said, they were busy too. They were keeping the storms away when they found them, and they were making sure that the seas were calm so that they could have good smooth sailing. But Hina had nothing to do. She was a wife of the chief, and she was a fairly recent wife. So she didn't quite know what to do. And nobody invited her because they were all too busy. The sister even, Mamao, was even too busy to talk to her. And she didn't even think about it. So what happens? Hina gets bored, Hina gets restless, and Hina starts to get angry. Because nobody's giving her any guidance, nobody's telling her how they can help, or how she can help, or what she can do. So this anger starts to build and build throughout the whole voyage. So finally they keep sailing and sailing and sailing. Finally one day the two brothers in the form of birds come and they say that they have found an island where the people dress in banana leaves and all they eat is bananas. And Neil says, that's got to be Kauai. Okay? That's the famous banana eating moo that you can read stories about. Okay, so he guides, following the brothers, he guides the canoe over until they reach Kauai. Now, Kauai is almost a round island. A lot of you know that, some don't, but on the eastern side, there's a major river called the Wailua River. And that's what he sailed for. He sailed up the Wailua River. Now, if you were coming in the Wailua River, let's say you were all on a canoe, you come past the mouth of the river, and fortunately this was a time when the sandbar was really low, so they could get through. And what you come is almost looks like an entrance, because there's a flat land, inland for a little ways, and then there's two mountain ranges. They come and they both end in steep cliffs. So it almost looks like a V when you're looking at it from the sea. And over on this side, from your point of view, is a mountain that's sometimes known as Sleeping Giant. And over on this side is a peak, almost the same height across, which is called Mount Akapu, which means Sacred Mountain. And they came up to the foot of that one, and at the foot of that one there are 3 caves. And so this is where they figured they'd make their base. So they, Neololo and Hina took the high cave. The brothers took the middle cave, in the bird form, so they could go in and out. And Mama took the lowest cave, which today a lot of people call Fern Grotto. But that's the cave where she lived, and she set her things up. So then they started contacting the people of Kauai, who were very excited and very happy, because here came people with knowledge, and here came people with new plans. And so again, here came, everybody got busy. So Neololo was very busy meeting with the men of the island and teaching them how to fish and teaching them how to plant taro and other kinds of crops. So then Mama is very busy, and she's teaching the women how to make tapa cloth. You all know what tapa cloth is? Anybody told you? Okay, if you don't know the word. In old Hawaii, they would make cloth from the bark of a particular tree, several different kinds. But they would make bark, they would peel off the bark, and then they would beat it until it became soft and flexible. And they did that when it was wet, and then they would dry it in the sun. And you have a very nice piece of cloth. You wouldn't want to go swimming in it. So this is why the Hawaiians in the old days, when they went swimming, they always went swimming nude, because they left all their tapa clothing on the beach, because it's paper, basically, called paper bark. So anyway, takes a skill, there's a lot involved in it. And so Mama was teaching all the women how to do tapa cloth. And the brothers were acting as messengers. They were carrying information, knowledge back and forth with the people in the different parts of the island. Okay? The 2 gods that Lono had lent them had already gone back to Lono. And here's Hina, with nothing to do. Bored, restless, angry, and now jealous. Because all the women came and they were going to Mama. And they would be talking, and in the old times when they beat tapa, they would have a particular log of a particular material, and they would have a beating stick, and they would pick these logs for their sound. And so it was almost like a drum. And it wasn't hollow, but it had, had a resonance. They picked ones for that. And the women in the old days had developed a kind of a code where they could actually, it was almost like, let's call it Morse code, that they had among themselves. So they could be sitting there because the tapa was very loud, and they wanted to talk with each other, but you can't talk while everybody's beating tapa. So they developed this code, and they would have a conversation while they're making the clothing back and forth. Very clever. But Hina couldn't be part of that because she didn't know how to make tapa. Nobody had ever taught her. And we know where she came from, people made it for her. Right? And nobody invited her over, nobody even thought about it. They were just all too busy. So now it starts to get into jealousy, then it starts getting into a kind of a rage and the feeling of helplessness that some people get. When they're very angry, they can't change the situation, they don't know how to change it. And then sometimes what happens is that they will explode in violence as a means of trying to feel effective or competent or powerful or something. And so this is what Hina did. Now see, all of these people had their own kinds of powers. And Hina had her power too. And her power was the ability to work with water. But she didn't know how to use it in a good way. So what she did was she caused the waters of the little rivers to dam up and rise. Now, Fern Grotto, if you looked at it, the river comes right by it like this. And the Fern Grotto, the grotto itself, is a big hole cave, but it's very close to the water. And so the waters rose up, and Hina caused the waters to rise up very fast, fill the cave, and then rush out to sea, carrying Mamao with her. With the water. Okay? And they rushed out so fast, the brothers who were flying in the sky saw this happening, but they couldn't do anything about it. They didn't know who made it happen. So all they could do was follow her. And one of them went to call Niolo, and the other one followed Mama to keep sight of her and see, and she couldn't get back because the current was too strong against her. And so Niolo came down by the edge of the sea, but again, because of the way the water was going and the current, there's nothing he could do to help her. And the brothers, Ulili and Kolea, were up in the air above, wailing. And that's what these birds sound like, wandering tower and the Kolea. And finally, Lolo, up in the heavens, heard the wailing. He came down and he saw what was happening. He sent his gods down again. Keao Miki, the low tide, Keao Ka, the high tide. They worked together to bring the waters back into peace and bring Mama back to shore. Well, you see, Hina, while all this was happening, she was seeing all the effects of what she had done. She was just mad. She just blasted out like somebody would, even a child sometimes would hit somebody they love just because they're frustrated. And that's what she did. Then she saw the effects of it. So she was an intelligent woman, and she was not a bad person. She was doing it because she was mad, but she didn't give any thought to what the effects of that would be. When she saw that Mama almost died, when she saw all the tapa that was ruined, when she saw the fear in the people that they were trying to help, when she saw all the anxiety of the brothers and the new Lolo, she really felt regret, deep regret of what she did. So when Mama was back on shore, he went down and she said, I'm so sorry. I really ask your forgiveness for doing this. I'm just very sorry that I did it. And immediately Mama said, no, mine is the fault. Because I never invited you, I never showed you anything, I never shared with you. And so, that's also why it happened. And what they did in a very kind of short form, it happens in Hawaiian is called po'opo'o. It means to straighten things out. And most people nowadays know it as a kind of family therapy or group therapy kind of thing, but it could be as simple as two people agreeing on what they did wrong and agreeing to forgive each other. And that's a po'opo'o. So that's what happened there. There was forgiveness, there was restitution, because Hina taught Mamao how to work with water, where they were able to make all the irrigation ditches then on Kauai. And Mamao taught Hina how to make tapa. Hina later became very famous as a tapa maker. And so they became fast friends, and they lived happily ever after. I'm not going to say everybody lived happily ever after, that's too much. They lived happily ever after. Now, let's look at that and see some of the things that we can learn from that. Because what we're talking about is ways of healing the past or the consequences of the past. And this is what frustrates so many people who really often don't know how to do it or what to do. And, or maybe have learned so many things that they start to get confused about. So I want to give you some ideas. What we saw was forgiveness. Now, first of all, real forgiveness, it's good to understand, forgiveness is a skill. It's not something that happens automatically just because you say the words. What's behind that is the necessity of changing your feeling about what happened. That's how you know forgiveness has taken place. Nothing magic about words. Words can help you focus, but words don't make things happen. We'll talk a little bit more about words in a moment. The main thing I want to get across is forgiveness is a change of feeling about someone or about a situation. Now, how you arrive at that change of feeling, we're assuming the change in a positive way. Okay? How you arrive at that, hundreds and thousands of possible techniques, and that can get confusing. But when we're thinking about it as a skill, when we do things that require skill, we need tools of some kind. These can be mental tools, they can be physical tools, but we have to have some kinds of things. So, to make it simple and understandable and effective, we can think of the ways to forgive in terms of 4 categories, 4 types of tools, if you want to call them. And any of these can work by themselves, or some people like to use them in a combination. So let's talk about these ways. One of the first ways, and one that most people think of first, is the use of words. But you got to remember, like I said, the words, saying the words I forgive, or even saying the words I don't forgive, we don't want to do that. But even saying the words I forgive, that doesn't make forgiveness happen. Okay? Because forgiveness has to do with the change in the person who is forgiving. It's got really little to do with the other person. So many people think that they're not going to forgive because this is giving away my power and I'm doing something good for them. And 99% of the time, the other person couldn't care less. Don't even know what you're feeling. Right? And you're all worried about giving something to them. They're clueless. Forgiveness is about changing yourself. Now, words are very useful tool for this because remember, like I said, they help you focus and they can help you change focus. So one of the really good ways to bring about that feeling of forgiveness, which means when you are no longer feeling angry toward the person or toward the situation. And where words can be very, very useful is when we use them to reinterpret what happened. Now, sometimes you can say the words I forgive. If that helps you change the feeling, okay, no problem. But when we reinterpret something that happened, when we can think, for instance, that this happened because they didn't know any better, or they didn't know what they were doing, or they didn't know how to do it any differently. Right? And so, why do I have to be mad at them for being stupid? Not necessarily put it that way, but hey, if that helps, okay? You can reinterpret the situation in a way that changes your feeling. One example that I've used before is when I worked with a young man who could not forgive his mother because she betrayed him when he was 7 years old. And so what we did was use a technique I call a skinny description. And a skinny description is where you can describe something that happened with no adjectives and no adverbs. No words that increase emotion. Just a bare bones description. And so I talked about it with this man, and he finally came with a description that was accurate. He admitted it. He came up with it. It was his accurate description. When I was 7 years old, my mother left home and I don't know why. Well, that changed the whole feeling. Threw out the word betrayed because there was no evidence of that. He had nothing to base that on. What actually happened was she left and he didn't know why. And what's the point of continuing to feel angry about that? Because he had no idea what her motivation was. Would have been anything. When he did that and was able to change his feeling, when he changed his feeling, he felt totally free because he'd always felt held back from doing what he really wanted to do because of this thing that had happened with his mother. Now, there was no more feeling, there was no more anger, there was nothing holding him back. He was free. The word forgiveness in Hawaiian is from the word kala. And this word means to release. And it doesn't mean to release the anger, because you can't do that. And shouting out till the anger's gone, all you're doing is teaching yourself how to be angry. As soon as you get your breath back, you get to be angry again. Kala is to release the tension associated with the remembering. And when you do that, the feeling changes. In this case, I'm just telling you how to do it with words. Now, another one of the really great tools that we have as human beings is imagination. We can use imagination in all kinds of different ways to help us change the feeling. We can imagine the whole situation as being silly and absurd. If that changes the feeling, there's no anger left. That's useful. And remember, the imagination here, visualization, some people call it, doesn't change anything. It's just like words. It helps you focus in a way that helps you change how you feel. So you can, I've worked with some people who were angry because they were scared of somebody. And every time they thought of them, they thought of themselves as real small, and they thought of the other people as so big and overpowering. And so I just helped them with the imagination, just gave them the idea of change the size of each person. Until the other person in their imagination was very small. And who could be angry at something so small? And what's the point? And they were really big. And that changed the feeling. Sometimes you can here's some very interesting ways for imagination. You're changing the way you remember it, not the event, but you use your imagination to change the way you remember it, so that, surprisingly, but this works. If you remember it in black and white, then you purposely change it to color. If you remember it in color, the same way, you change it to black and white. If you remember it big and up close, then you change it to small and far away, or vice versa. You find some way in which the memory presents itself, and you change that. Why does this work? It works because we remember by association. And we often develop the habit of remembering good things in one way and bad things in a different way. And if we can pay attention to that, one way we can do this is by remembering some good things and paying attention to how they appear, and then changing the bad memory so that it looks like one of the good memories. And the feeling will change. Here's the magic. When you change that pattern of association in your memory, the feeling changes. That's what we're after. You don't even have to say, I forgive you. When the feeling changes, that's when you know forgiveness has happened. So these are some of the ways in which you can use that wonderful tool of imagination to forgive or to reach that state of forgiveness, which is the state in which you're no longer angry. What do you think of it? And we're not talking suppression. We want to be able to think of it freely without the anger feeling. So we've talked about words, we've talked about imagination. Another one that I've talked about in a number of sessions that I've taught here has to do with posture. Because especially when we're thinking in terms of anger, anger is always associated with a particular posture state that our body gets into. And it's a state of tension. It can look different with different people. But sometimes it's pretty obvious. Sometimes it's very subtle until you are with a person for a while, because I've been with people who look very calm, very peaceful. And yet when you talk to them for a while, underneath it's like they're simmering, ready to burst, but they're smiling at the same time. And there's this big contrast between how they look and how they feel. And it's the energy that you have to pay attention to, which just tells you that there's tremendous anger tension right underneath. And very often, if you cross them in the slightest way, that smile becomes frozen. Well, if you find that, discover that in yourself, you'll find that you can feel how your body feels when you think about a particular thing. And if you can be aware of where in your body that tension lies and shift your posture, that will change your feeling. And if you can get to the point where you have a relaxed posture whenever you think about this particular thing that used to bother you, then you'll be in a state of forgiveness in relation to that. A state in which thinking of that no longer produces the feeling of anger. This is what we're after. And that frees up so much of your energy. If you have things in your life that you keep thinking about with tension, and if you're angry, there's always tension, how much of your energy that's locking up in your life that you can't use creatively, that you can't use to change things, that you can't use for love and compassion and so many other healing and so much else. You don't need that tension. It serves you no purpose whatsoever. If it makes you feel powerful, it's a false power. Because all that tension is actually reducing your real power. So it makes sense to do these things. But posture is another one. Okay? And then there's just one that we can simply call energy. Okay? And by that I mean movement of some kind. It can be relaxation sometimes. Sometimes we can be angry about something and we go for a walk and then all the anger goes away. Because we've gotten into motion. And sometimes we can use imagination to help us, but sometimes deeper breathing just increases the flow of energy. And sometimes, a lot of cultures and teachers teach this to just take a few deep breaths or count to 10 and breathe deeply. And they say that because it works. It's one of the ways that works. We've got to get energy moving in some way. Some people do exercise, some people go running. But if you do this with the intention to feel differently, that's when it works best. Because if you don't have that intention, you'll run off the energy, and during that time you won't be thinking about it, and then when you think about it again, you get all tense up again. You don't want that. When you make these changes, these energetic changes, and you make them on purpose with the intention to feel differently about the situation, that gives it a lot of effectiveness. Let's put it that way. Okay. So, here are some ideas, some ways to do this when we're dealing with the past. Because the only place that we can deal with the past is in the present. So let's follow up with this just a little bit. Because sometimes this needs understanding too. You can't change the past from the present. Let's be real clear about that. The past in relation to the present isn't anymore. It's like going out in your sailing canoe and trying to catch yesterday's wind. Try that sometime. It isn't going to happen. What's past is past. Gone, done, finished, pop. That's what life is finished. You can, however, and this is the most important part, you can change the present. And so when you change how you feel about something, in how you feel about a memory in the present, you feel. Could you get angry again if you decided to? Yes, but it would be creating new anger. It wouldn't be the old anger. The old anger is like yesterday's wind. When you stop being angry about something, it's gone. Anger's not a thing. And I know there's lots of techniques people teach where you just yell and scream until all the anger's out. It's not like a toxic liquid that's inside of you. It's a reaction to something. And all you do by doing that is learn how to act angry. It doesn't do anything. I want to share a little story with you that's similar to this. It relates anyway. A long time ago, I was at a conference on orbital energy in Toronto, Canada. And so I was there on my own, by myself. But it was a big auditorium. And there was a man who was supposed to be a real famous therapist, and he was demonstrating something. So he had everybody get up and pair off and face each other and shout "no" at each other. No, no, no. And he kept building it and building it and building it and building it. There was all this anger building up among the whole audience, and then he sat down, leaving everybody there full of anger that had been generated by this process. Well, I immediately, as soon as I realized that he had let all of this anger go, I immediately stopped, focused, and did something that we use sometimes, another technique that's really loose, an energy technique, where I just covered the whole auditorium in soft pink light. The intention of my imagination was peacefulness, calmness, connection. Because this was a very separation kind of process. So this was my intention. So I just focused and put my hands together and kept this field to help calm things down. While I was doing this, off over on my left, down a few rows, I noticed a circle of about 5 or 6 people. They were standing in a circle. And they were focused, doing something. I don't know what they were doing at the time. I thought that was very innocent, because out of this whole crowd of people who were all upset, there was this little quiet circle with me. So after the energy dissipated enough and the situation changed, I went down and talked to them. Introduced myself, asked who they were. They were a Huna group in Toronto, Canada. Huna is the name of the knowledge that we teach, coming from Hawaii, and they were a group that was studying this same kind of knowledge. I thought that was good. That's what this stuff is designed to do. So that was a quest state where we used an energy technique to help calm things down, and we didn't. So do we have any questions about any of these techniques, any of these categories, any idea of healing the past?
How do you recognize and distinguish false power from real power?
Oh, that's very simple. False power is when you can't do what you want to do. Real power is when it works. Now, you have to be a little careful here, because it depends on what you want to do. So when we're talking about power in this sense, and we use the Hawaiian word mana, okay, it's always in a positive sense. It's always a positive result. So you can have power to hurt somebody, okay, and that's called power. But it's very, very limited and overall ineffective power. because it's power against. And it not only takes tension, but produces tension. Okay, so that's not considered real power. Real power is when something is resolved or something is produces growth, something produces connection, something produces more effectiveness for the people considered. That's real power in these terms. Okay. And you hear sometimes about people doing vandalism. Why? How could they do that? They do it because it gives them a false sense of power. It's a little hit. And if you take enough hits from the right drug or other source, why, it's not very good for you or the people around you. Okay? That's a false sense of power. There's no real effectiveness involved in that. Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, when you talk about releasing anger, wouldn't it be better to try to avoid the anger in the beginning?
Well,
I mean, if possible, or
when we say avoid the anger, I have to be really careful with this, because let's look at this in two ways. Let's do it the way a lot of people think they're avoiding anger. A lot of people think they're avoiding anger by clamping up and not allowing their muscles to move. And all that does is produce tension. Enough tension will reduce feeling. And so they think, oh, I'm not angry about that. But sometimes immediately and sometimes over time, it's going to affect the functioning of the body and the functioning of the mind, because it's based on tension. And that's one kind of avoidance that doesn't work very well. If you practice, well, here's a good way. If you practice reducing the number of rules you have about other people's behavior, okay, then you get less angry, less often, because it just doesn't come up. Okay? You're no longer fighting against what so many people do, getting angry about it and upset about it because of your rules. One situation I had one time on Kauai, I remember, I didn't realize I had this rule until this happened. But living in Princeville, and I was coming down to a corner, and there I saw somebody just drive right through a stop sign. Oh, I got so angry. Then I suddenly realized, wait a second here. This is a state law. There are consequences for doing that. I'm not the state. Why am I angry? And then the thought came up, oh, he might hurt somebody. I looked around. There wasn't anybody. There was nobody on any of the streets. Okay? What am I getting angry about? And I had to really look at that and change the rule. Yes, if something happens that is potentially dangerous and I have an opportunity to change it or protect somebody, I will do that. But I don't have to get angry about it. I don't have to get angry when somebody breaks one of the state rules. Especially, it's okay if I go through the stop sign, because I'll have a good reason for it. Oh, it was amazing what I discovered in the rules. And there can be all kinds of little things, and we'll find ourselves getting irritated, we'll find upset, oh, when they do that, or we'll read something in the paper as if it were, the truth. And so often, things are presented in a partial way with the best of intentions. Examine your rules. The fewer rules you have, the less anger, less opportunity for anger.
actually, I do have a rule that really bothers me, people littering out of their car. Now I have a litter hotline on my cell phone. So whenever I'm following somebody in the litter, I just hit it, call them, give them their license plate number.
Sure.
That makes me feel good.
That's what it's for. Now you've done something positive. That's right. What we did on Kauai was pick up the litter.
Well,
There's different ways to do it. I know you can't do that all the time. But not being angry about it is the key. You can make changes and you can do effective stuff to change the situation. You don't need the anger, which interferes with your effectiveness. Yes.
I've gotten pretty good at eliminating a lot of my rules, so I don't get angry as much or don't stay angry as long. But if I really want to dig for stuff,
Really want what?
find stuff that gets me angry,
Oh, yes.
go to the places where people are really bad. This is where I'm trying to find out how can I forgive them for their actions, where hunters are bashing baby seals, you know, when they're like 3 weeks old or something. You see pictures of this on the internet,
That's right.
and you just go, how could a human being do that? How could they do that to
Okay. Well, first of all, it's
Situations
situations like that, we need to do something to change them when we can, but it's helpful to understand how people can do that.
Tell me.
Okay, good. No, this is good to understand. Human beings have the capability of connecting and disconnecting when it serves their interest. So human beings have the ability to decide something is separate and apart from them and has no relationship to them and is therefore, doesn't matter what you do with it. People can do that to other people. In a lot of history, human history in which that's been the case. People can do that to animals, people can do that to property, people can do that to all kinds of stuff. There is that capability of disconnecting. Now, it doesn't produce happiness, so it's not a very effective technique. It can produce some temporary forms of false power satisfaction, but it always produces tension. Because the more you disconnect with the world around you, the more tension builds up in your body. That's why it feels so good when you connect. That's why sometimes we go to an open space, somewhere we're coming out of the woods and we're standing on the edge of a bluff and a huge valley and the sun's setting, and so we feel this expansion. Just, oh, and it feels so good because it's our natural feeling good when we connect with something beyond and larger than ourselves. To close down and separate from something takes a lot of tension. But it can become a habit. So that you're no longer feeling any empathy, no longer feeling any compassion or sympathy or caring about it at all. It's in your way. Move it up. Or it's nothing but an animal. This is a common one. With this belief, we've been raised up that we are human beings and the ultimate universe, and that's nothing but an animal. It doesn't matter what we do. There's got to be this disconnection before people can do something like that. Now, that doesn't mean you have to like it, or it doesn't mean you have to say, oh gee, I'm sorry for being upset. But it helps you understand what the behavior is, and that often the behavior is not to, it may vary with some people, but usually the behavior is just, this is what I do. I'm a fisherman. I'm a hunter. I'm this or that that requires the death or destruction of something for some greater good that I believe in. People think that way, and they're not doing it for the purpose of harm. They're doing it because that's the income from their family. And I'm not saying that justifies it, I'm just trying to explain the thinking that gets involved with that. They disconnect from it, and so it doesn't seem like they're doing something bad. Put the focus on the people who are trying to help change these behaviors. Give them strength, give them energy. Because there are groups trying to do that. Focus on the potential for compassion that might be in these people. And who knows when they're going to have a day when they suddenly start thinking about it differently with the help of your focus. That's much more productive.
Okay, I think I just got a technique because Russia just passed a law, nobody can kill anything younger than a year old, any seal younger than a year. Canada hasn't, so I'm going to kind of build a rainbow bridge between